Hey everyone, in this video we're going to be looking at how we can create a XY grid. We've done this previously using for loops and by increasing the value of X and Y and drawing an ellipse or a rectangle at that given point. However, we're going to be doing the XY grid using a different method over here. We're going to be moving the origin as we draw each ellipse or rectangle on the grid instead of having the origin in a constant place. What this allows us to do is to later create things like a generative pattern where each element in the grid is rotating about its own origin, something like what you see on the screen here. So first let's get started on how we can make the grid using this translate method. So to start off with, let's just draw a rectangle in the top left. So we're going to be using rect mode center for this. And then we'll say rectangle at 25, 25 of width and height 50, 50. Okay, so that gives us a rectangle on the top left over there. Let's just switch a few things with a variable. So I'm just going to create a variable called size, which is equal to 50. And instead of drawing a rectangle at 25, 25, I'm going to say size by 2, and the width and the height will be size. Okay. Now, instead of drawing this at size by 2, what we can do is we can move the origin to size by 2 over here, and then draw the rectangle at 0, 0. So to do that, first I'm just going to contain all my canvas changes within push and pop. And over here, I'm going to say translate size divided by 2, and then draw the rectangle at 0, 0. So ideally, this should give us the same result. Oops, let's make that size. Okay, so this is giving us the same result. Perfect. Now let's say we want to create the next rectangle to the right of this. For that, we will have to translate by size divided by 2 plus size. Meaning the translate value here would have changed. Perfect. And to draw the next one, we would ideally just keep doing size by 2 plus 2 into size. Now we can see the pattern happening here. So what we can do is we can put this inside a for loop. So I'm just going to create a variable for the for loop x. And I'm going to say for x equal to size divided by 2, x less than 400, x equals x plus size. So this is actually very similar to the for loop that we had written previously. If you have any questions with this, you can go ahead and recap the video that says for loop in the beginning of this module. So let's just tidy this code. Okay. So now what happens is we're running a for loop, except inside the for loop, instead of changing the position of the rectangle, let's change how much the origin moves by. So I'm going to make this x. Perfect. So now we have a for loop that draws the entire x row. So let's just copy this and do the same for y. I'm going to say for y equals size by 2, y less than 400, y equals y plus size. Let's also declare the variable. And within the for loop, we're going to make the translate to x comma y. Perfect, now we have the grid. But what was the point of doing this? We still have the same grid that we always had. The cool thing about this is now that each rectangle is being drawn such that the origin is its center. So let's do a few things. Let's make the size of the rectangle maybe size divided by 2 so that there's a couple of white spaces, gray spaces in this case. And let's create another variable called r, which we'll be using for rotation, and I'm going to initialize r to 0. And each time we come into the draw loop, we're going to be increasing the value of r by 1. So r equals r plus 1. And what we'll do is, after translating the origin, we will also rotate by r. So now each of these components are actually spinning about their own center. To see that, we can actually reduce the frame rate to maybe 5 to see what's happening. Maybe 10. So that you can see this changing angle, and it's still a little janky. That's because the angle mode is being calculated in radians. So let's go ahead and change that to degrees. There, you can see the slow movement happening now. Now you can even go ahead and do things like, if you don't want the rotate to be based on r but on your movement, you can say rotate mouse x. So let's see what happens. So now each of these is actually rotating about its own center point based on the mouse value. So this concept is important, where we move the origin mainly when you want to do things like rotate. Now, along with rotate, there is also a function called scale. And what scale does is it changes the size of the canvas. So let's see what happens if we say something like scale 0.5. This is a constant number, so it should, the entire thing has become half the size of what it was before. So if I say scale 2, it'll become double the size of what it was. Now what we can do is we can say something like scale mouse y divided by 200, because mouse y is a very large number. So let's say mouse y divided by 200. So now we can make this whole thing rotate and scale as we move our mouse. So you can really play around with this now that you know how to use the function random. You know how to create your own grids. Now you also know how to make the element of each grid be at its origin. And so you can play around with this and create something like this. So play around with this, have fun, and we're excited to see what you make. Thank you.